I heard my husband whisper, "The DNA test is wrong." I asked what he meant. He just looked away. This morning, his best friend texted me, "You're overreacting." My mother-in-law stayed silent. OOP, 42F, is married to Luke, 43, whose best friend, Amy, 43, has been in his life since they were 7 years old. OOP and Luke met in college and built a strong marriage, while Luke and Amy have always had a close, almost sibling-like bond. The three of them are deeply connected, with OOP and Luke frequently spending time with Amy. Wanting Amy to have a family of her own, OOP once tried to set her up with a partner, but nothing ever worked out. For clarity, OOP categorizes their children as follows. OOP and Luke's children: Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's children: Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins Adam and Jenna, 9. Amy never had a committed relationship but occasionally dated. She became pregnant multiple times without knowing the fathers of her children, though she never seemed concerned about raising them alone. Throughout the years, OOP and Luke supported her both financially and emotionally. However, given Luke and Amy's extremely close friendship and Amy's lack of other significant relationships, OOP began questioning whether Luke could be the father of some, or even all, of Amy's children. These doubts grew stronger over time, particularly after OOP and Luke's youngest child was born, at which point Luke had a vasectomy. Coincidentally, Amy never got pregnant again after that, which only deepened OOP's suspicions. Luke frequently visits Amy and her children, acting in a fatherly capacity, which OOP found unsettling. Over time, she noticed physical similarities between Luke and Amy's kids, as well as shared allergies and traits. Although OOP acknowledges that Amy's children appear biracial, which could contradict her suspicions, she still finds the circumstances suspicious. Despite her growing doubts, OOP kept her concerns to herself, worried about being seen as the villain and damaging their family relationships. She also reflected on Amy's mixed feelings about motherhood, wondering if Luke's strong involvement in her children's lives was more than just support. Meanwhile, OOP became increasingly wary when her daughter Sophie attracted the attention of Tom, Amy's eldest son. Tom expressed romantic interest in Sophie, but she turned him down, respecting their parents' boundaries. However, OOP firmly opposed the idea of them dating, causing tension, as Sophie didn't understand the reasoning behind her mother's decision. Although Amy and Luke initially supported OOP's stance, Luke worried that forbidding the relationship might only make it more appealing. As time passed, Tom continued seeking out Sophie, spending more time with her, which left OOP feeling powerless. While Sophie insists they're just friends, Tom has been affectionate toward her, raising concerns that they may be secretly dating. OOP is tormented by the possibility that Tom and Sophie could be half-siblings if her worst fears about Luke and Amy's relationship are true. She struggles with whether to uncover the truth about the children's paternity, knowing that doing so could irreparably damage their family dynamic and hurt everyone involved. Update: OOP decided to confront Luke and Amy regarding the suspicions she had about their close bonding and possible affair. Luke and Amy gave OOP well-rehearsed responses as she expected. Amy was upset about the accusations against her. Luke was more understanding and respected OOP's feelings about her suspicions. Betrayal is going all around for all three. OOP asked Luke for the paternity tests, which upset him, but he agreed to it to give her the peace of mind on the children's identities. Amy didn't want to do the DNA test. She got so mad at OOP for the accusations and told OOP she won't get her children's DNA samples. Luke has continued with his claims that nothing has happened between him and Amy all of those years. Tom is old enough to consent on his DNA sample, but if he and Amy refuse to take DNA tests, OOP might ask Luke to check with Tom's younger siblings. Luke doesn't want to take Amy to the court for this to happen. Here's where OOP is worried. OOP was hoping Luke could talk with Tom to prevent him from pursuing a relationship with Sophie. Luke is hoping OOP could reconcile with Amy, but she doesn't think so. Phil and Mil, Luke's parents, Jim and Kat, learn about OOP's fears regarding Luke and Amy. Turned out Kat had same suspicions that OOP had. Jim is denying the fact on Luke and Amy having an affair, maintaining Luke and Amy are best friends and siblings. Kat has wondered if Amy's children were fathered by Luke. Update: OOP decided it was time to have a private conversation with Sophie, believing she was old enough to understand the possibility of her father's affair with Amy. When Sophie heard what her mother had to say, she immediately suggested involving Tom in the discussion. OOP then shared everything with Tom as well, only to discover that both he and Sophie had already harbored the same suspicions about their parents. Tom and Sophie revealed that they had devised a plan to fake a romantic relationship in hopes of provoking a reaction or uncovering evidence against Luke and Amy. OOP was relieved to learn the truth behind their supposed relationship and was grateful to have them on her side. After a long discussion, Tom willingly offered a DNA sample so OOP could determine whether Luke was his biological father. Update: the DNA test results are still pending, and it will take some time before OOP finds out if Tom and Sophie are half-siblings. In the meantime, OOP has been talking extensively with both of them, gathering as much evidence as possible for her lawyer to review as she prepares for divorce proceedings. She has also clarified some aspects of the situation. She does not believe Jim, a possible past suspect, had any affair with Amy. Additionally, since the house is legally in her name and not Luke's, she has the legal authority to make him move out when necessary. While Tom and Sophie's fake relationship plan didn't lead to any incriminating evidence on Luke's devices, OOP took advice from comments and dug deeper. She eventually found deleted messages between Luke and Amy, where they discussed OOP as being the problem. That was all the confirmation she needed. Luke had been having an affair behind her back. Further investigation led to the discovery of letters, videos, and pictures, solidifying her case. With undeniable proof in hand, OOP wasted no time. She packed Luke's belongings, presented him with divorce papers, and kicked him out of the house. Luke, realizing he had been caught, pleaded with her to reconsider and work things out, but OOP refused. While her younger children were told that their father would be away for a few days, only Sophie knew the full truth about the affair. Meanwhile, Jim and Kat found themselves caught in the fallout. Luke had shown up at their doorstep, offering his version of events, leaving Jim unsure of what to believe. However, Kat was already aware of the truth. As for Amy, she has completely gone silent since OOP confronted her and Luke. Update: OOP has been working closely with her lawyer, Paige, to finalize the divorce and present the evidence of Luke's affair. During this process, she ran into her family lawyer, Zach, who had previously represented both her and Luke in an unrelated case. Wanting to stay ahead, OOP took proactive steps to ensure all necessary legal documentation was in place, including securing primary custody of her children with supervised visitation rights for Luke. As the situation escalated, OOP started attending therapy and has been arranging therapy for her children as well to help them cope and move forward in a healthy way. She has also been having age-appropriate discussions with them about the divorce. The DNA results are finally in. Sophie and Tom are not siblings. Additionally, the results confirmed that Jim is not the father of Amy's children, as his DNA would have been present if he were. While this provides some answers, it also raises new questions. Who is Tom's biological father? And did the same man father Amy's younger children as well? Meanwhile, Amy and Luke have become furious with OOP, suspecting she accessed Luke's devices to gather evidence against them. Amy, refusing to apologize for the alleged affair, lashed out verbally and even resorted to physical violence. She damaged OOP's laptop and assaulted her, prompting OOP to file a police report against her. Now, OOP is left questioning Amy's true motives in this entire situation. Update: Luke has now hired a lawyer. Many people advised OOP to press charges against Amy for the assault, but she decided to first submit her video evidence to her legal team to determine if there was enough ground for an arrest. However, before she could take further action, a tragic event occurred. Jim, Luke's father, passed away from a heart attack. Both families came together for the funeral, and for the sake of her children, OOP temporarily set aside the affair drama to allow them to grieve without additional stress. She and Luke made a mutual decision not to discuss Amy in front of the kids during this time. During this period, OOP discovered another betrayal. Kat had withheld information regarding the DNA test. She never actually submitted her son's sample, meaning that Tom could still be Luke's son. Overcome with guilt, Kat finally confessed to OOP, admitting she had been struggling with the burden of knowing the truth. Meanwhile, OOP's lawyers completed their review of the evidence she had gathered against Luke and Amy. To her shock, they uncovered something OOP had not previously been aware of, something significant enough to explain why Amy panicked and destroyed her laptop. However, OOP has chosen not to disclose the details, stating that it is too sensitive to share, even in an anonymous post. As things stand, OOP is uncertain if she will ever be able to forgive Luke and Amy. The weight of their betrayal has left her deeply torn apart. Update: hey everyone, this may be my last update for a while. I'm currently in therapy, as are my children, and from what I've heard, Amy's kids are also receiving help, which is a relief. I know I should be focusing on healthier ways to process my emotions, but I did discuss these posts with my therapist. According to her, venting anonymously online can be beneficial, to a certain extent. If I choose to share more about my life in the future, I may do so in different subreddits, though I haven't decided yet. I also had my meeting with the judge. Many people were concerned that my posts could be used against me legally, but the short answer is, they won't. Since everything is anonymous and names have been changed, there's no risk of defamation or slander. These posts won't play a role in my case, and I'm free to continue writing as long as I don't discuss the legal proceedings in detail. That said, I get the impression the judge would prefer I stop altogether, which is one reason I may step away from updating. Without getting into specifics, I went ahead and reported what I had uncovered, and everything blew up. I knew I had to do it, especially after Amy and Luke started shifting their narrative following Jim's passing. They suddenly began claiming that Luke and I had always had an open marriage, meaning there was never actually an affair and that any relationship between Luke and Amy shouldn't be held against them. It's no coincidence that they waited until Jim was gone to push this story. He was likely the only other person who truly knew the extent of what they had done and would have held them accountable. They must have assumed I wasn't aware of the full truth and tried to rewrite history. But I did know, and once I reported it, there was no going back for them. Unfortunately, that also meant the truth spread to everyone else, including the children. There was no way to keep them from hearing about it. Knowing this, I chose to personally tell Sophie and Tom, since they would have found out regardless. As expected, Tom was in complete shock. I know I was just the messenger, but seeing his reaction made me feel terrible. I wanted to comfort him, but there was only so much I could do. Kaylee, on the other hand, took it even harder. I was told she had multiple breakdowns and ultimately tried to run away. I know this because she ran to my house seeking refuge. And honestly, the hardest thing I've ever had to do was return her. Every instinct told me to defy Amy and let Kaylee stay with us, but I knew I had to give her back. Even though I understand why, it doesn't make it any easier. I still feel like I betrayed her. Sophie's also been dealing with a lot of anger toward her father, especially after he and Amy forced Kaylee to come back to stay with Amy again. All of this. It hit Sophie and Kaylee the hardest. Luke wanted to see Sophie again and she refused. She wouldn't come out of her room. Technically, I was supposed to let him see her, but she's 15 years old. I told her to come out of her room, she wouldn't. So in my book, I tried. This was after Kaylee's incident, so when Luke pressed me to force Sophie out of her room, I'm not proud to say I shouted at him to leave. My blood was boiling by that point. Throughout all this, my soon-to-be ex-husband and his affair partner are still acting like I'm the bad guy. Luke and Amy are angry with me, and that's putting it lightly. They have no right to be, but they are, or at least they're acting angry. I now have a restraining order against Amy because I was quite certain she would confront me after the fact, and she did. After I reported them, and before Kaylee came over, Amy came to the house while my kids were home, banged on the door and screamed. She was furious with me for what I had done. But I don't know what she expected me to do. I called the police, but Amy was gone by the time they showed up. They were just as useless as last time, to be honest. When Kaylee came to me for asylum, Amy came after her, but I wouldn't let her in until she called the cops herself. I would only let one of them take Kaylee. Amy was not setting foot in my house. I was very clear to explain the situation, but it didn't matter. Amy later smeared me on social media and framed me as a kidnapper. I set the record straight without divulging too much about the circumstances of the situation, which I was tempted to do. Luke also gave me the lecture of a lifetime when I saw him, but I just kept cutting him off and spitting the facts in his face. I don't know if it's been my time away from him, but I'm learning to recognize his bullshit now where previously I fell for it every time. He always sounds so reasonable and sweet, but what he's actually saying is often circular and evasive. Honestly, I am so angry with him for what he's done to his children, all of them. Kaylee especially. I want to adopt that girl. I know I can't, but I want to. Kat and I had a long conversation. As far as I can tell, she wasn't aware of everything and genuinely regrets her past deception. Rebuilding trust takes time, but I recognize that she was in a difficult situation. Now that certain truths have come to light, she's struggling herself, and I can't help but feel sorry for her. More importantly, if Amy loses custody of her kids, which is a real possibility, I'm going to need all the help I can get. I don't have the space to take them all in, so Kat will have to step up. In a way, I'm giving her a chance to regain my trust out of necessity. I can't predict the long term, but if everything goes as it should, Luke won't even have visitation rights with my children. Soon enough, we'll have confirmation, on record, about whether or not Amy's kids are biologically his. They've always been fairly certain Kaylee is, though she was never tested. From what I can tell, Amy hasn't been with anyone else for a long time. For now, Kat is still financially supporting Amy, which really means she's supporting Amy's kids. I don't mind that, but if Amy loses custody, that support will end anyway. As for how and why Amy and Luke got involved, I've pieced together what I could from the letters. Amy was sexually abused as a child, and it seems Luke was the only person she felt safe exploring intimacy with in high school. It was an incredibly bad decision, and they both understood why long before they went down that road. The claim that they were surrogate siblings wasn't entirely a lie. They did have that kind of emotional bond, but they also had this other, inappropriate connection. After Tom was born, who they both believe is theirs based on the letters, their relationship shifted into something more romantic. Amy refers to Luke as my person, and he says the same about her. I forced myself to read the letters more thoroughly despite how disturbing they were because I needed to understand. Personally, I'm doing better. That makes me feel a little guilty because everyone else is still struggling. My kids are miserable, which makes it hard for me, but I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I want them to see it too. Luke and Amy are miserable, and while I won't say I'm happy about it, I don't know what they expected. They've been playing a cruel game for decades. There were always going to be consequences. Amy's kids are suffering, especially Kaylee. I wish I could reach out to her, but I can't, except through Tom, and he has to be careful. Kat is also miserable. We're all still grieving Jim's loss, and the situation with Kaylee shattered me. But I think I've passed the worst of it. For the first time in a long time, I'm choosing myself, and that brings me some comfort. Additional information from OOP to clarify repeated questions. OOP, this isn't just about the cheating. Luke and Amy committed a serious crime, one that raises concerns about whether their children are safe with them. That's what I reported, and it's why Amy might lose custody. This also ties into the DNA tests, which will be mandatory due to the nature of the crime. I did meet with the judge, along with Luke and our lawyers, and specifically asked whether these posts were acceptable. I don't understand why people are struggling with this concept. I keep seeing comments saying, judges don't give legal advice, but their job is literally to make judgments, it's in the name. And that's exactly what happened. I've made it clear that I can't take in all of Amy's kids if she loses custody. But Luke definitely won't be able to either, he's just as implicated as she is. Most likely, Kat will be granted custody, but I'll still be involved and will offer support, including a place to stay when needed. Kat won't have an issue with that, and my connection to these kids isn't minor. I'm not just their father's ex-wife, I'm the mother of their half-siblings, who have been in their lives nearly every day. That counts for something. Update. Happy Halloween, everyone. It's been a while, and things have only continued to unravel. I've received a number of messages and comments from people checking in, which I really appreciate. While I still can't share much, I had my legal counsel review this post before uploading it to ensure it was safe to share. The biggest revelation, something I've already mentioned in the comments, is that Luke and Amy referred to themselves as half-siblings in the letters I found on Luke's laptop. The exact timeline is still somewhat unclear, but here's what I've been able to piece together. Jim had an affair with a college-aged student, which resulted in a pregnancy. Years later, that child, Amy, became friends with Jim's son, Luke. Amy suffered abuse in her parents' home, and Luke's family wanted to get her out of that situation, which they eventually did. That's when Jim revealed the truth to Luke and Amy. A couple of years later, they began a sexual relationship. As for recent developments, Kaylee was admitted to a psychiatric ward after Tom discovered that she had done something extremely reckless. Social services has since removed her from Luke and Amy's custody, and she is now staying with Kat. Amy was furious about this and reportedly had a meltdown, claiming that I would turn Kaylee against her. In her anger, she also made some concerning threats. I've been advised not to reach out directly, but Kaylee has all my contact information. I sent her a message letting her know that she can always come to me if she needs anything. I think that was the right thing to do. If she reaches out, I won't turn her away. My struggles aren't over, and they only got worse when the DNA test results came back. Everyone was tested, and I finally have undeniable proof. Luke is the biological father of all 4 of Amy's children. After years of uncertainty, the confirmation feels oddly empty. At this point, it changes very little, though it does confirm his infidelity. Luke, however, is still insisting that we had an open relationship. I had initially considered pursuing incest charges against them, but that plan hit a major roadblock. The court-ordered DNA tests also included Luke and Amy, and according to the results, they are not biologically related. I don't understand it either. Could Jim have been wrong this entire time? Regardless, I still have proof that they believed they were half-siblings. Now, however, they are trying to claim it was all just part of some elaborate roleplay. Luke also threw a curveball at me by demanding we test my children as well. I honestly hated him for that. They've been through enough as it is. But he is claiming that I also participated in the open relationship and that the paternity of our children will prove it. In particular, he was adamant that Sophie be tested. I couldn't figure out why. But I think Luke must know something I do not, because the test results for Sophie came back negative. They said that Luke is not her father. Then Luke began to claim that he had tested Sophie years ago to be sure. I was certain he was lying, that he had somehow sabotaged the test, but he did submit a DNA test from about 10 years ago and it likewise maintains that Luke is not Sophie's father. Before anyone asks, no, I never had an affair of my own. I never cheated on Luke. I had no idea how this had happened and I could not make sense of it. I requested another test and that has yet to arrive, but with 2 tests already, I'm bewildered and frightened. I don't know how this is possible. Since I was never unfaithful to Luke, I can only assume that something was done without my consent. I have never been sexually assaulted as far as I am aware. But there were a few nights, back when I used to get drunk with Amy, that someone could have possibly drugged me. What scares me is that Luke tested Sophie years ago. I feel like he knows more about this than he is letting on. I've discussed this with my therapist and my lawyer, I've tried to get to the bottom of it, but I just don't know. I've been completely honest with Sophie about everything. I believe Luke is trying to manipulate her, planting doubts in her mind to create a rift between us. I've reassured her that I never had an affair and that the test results simply don't make sense. I don't think she fully believes me, but she doesn't seem angry or feel betrayed either. If anything, I think she almost wishes it were true, that Luke wasn't her biological father. As for my other children, they don't know about this yet, though I suspect they'll find out soon. Rumors are spreading quickly among Amy's kids and my own. I've never been the type of parent to go through my children's messages, so I don't know exactly what's being said. However, I won't bring it up with them unless Sophie is comfortable with it. She's the only one whose test results came back negative, everyone else was confirmed to be Luke's biological children. Meanwhile, Kat isn't speaking to either of her kids right now, not as a form of silent treatment, but because she technically can't have any contact with Kaylee at the moment. So keeping her distance isn't really a choice. That said, she's furious with them both after seeing what Kaylee has been through. When she finally gets the chance to confront them, I expect it won't be pretty. I wish I could say things are getting better, but we're far from a happy ending. I'm deeply unsettled by the possibility that I might have been assaulted without even knowing it. If that turns out to be true, I'm dreading the conversation where Sophie learns about it, and about the truth of her origins. For now, I don't know when I'll be able to provide another update, but I am taking the kids to a haunted house tonight. Hopefully, that will bring a little fun into all of this chaos. Relevant comments. OOP on testing Sophie's DNA against her own after learning Luke isn't Sophie's father. OOP, I don't believe there was a mix-up since Sophie stayed with me after birth and was never placed in a nursery. But just to be absolutely certain, I could go ahead with the test. Could Sophie's DNA have been swapped with someone else's, or is there a chance OOP isn't her biological mother? OOP, while anything is technically possible, I just don't see how. She was never really out of my sight. I was a first-time mom and extremely protective, though I became more relaxed with my later pregnancies. I've heard of chimerism, though I don't think that applies here. Still, it might be worth looking into. Concerns about testing Sophie's DNA against her own. OOP, I am going to take the test, but I'm scared. If the results say she isn't mine, what happens then? Could the state take her away from me? OOP on the possibility of being drugged when she conceived Sophie. OOP, there were a few nights during that time when I got pretty drunk, yes. Commenter 1, if Luke only insisted on testing Sophie and not your other children, he must know something you don't. Assuming you're telling the truth and were never unfaithful, this opens a huge can of worms that I'm honestly afraid to even spell out. I hope you find answers, and that Luke is held accountable. OOP, he actually wanted all our children tested, but he was especially persistent about Sophie. OOP on Sophie's appearance compared to herself and Luke. OOP, yes, Sophie appears to have Asian features. She resembles me more than Luke, but she isn't an exact copy of me. Still, she looks enough like me that it's hard for me to believe she isn't my biological child.